Hey, Viking fans, this is Keith Millard, and you are listening to the One Bar and Lupagus Show. Go Vikes!
All right, welcome back to the One Bar and Lupagus Show. I am Lupagus, and today we are SKOL'ing with the enemy. We have Joe, a.k.a. the Professor from the Cardinal Rule. Joe, how are you doing?
I am doing really good, and that's what you'll get after a win like we had against the Tennessee Titans in a game that seemed like everyone was picking us to lose. So I know y'all are not having as good of a week, so I certainly don't want to rub that in too much, but I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, you beat the Titans. We lost to the Bengals. We lost to the Bengals. And I know when overtime and whether he was down or not doesn't matter. We had literally 6 penalties in the first 8 plays that we ran. It was not pretty, but as Vikings fans, we are very used to that. So we're moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, which is a matchup that horrifies me on paper. So anyway, let's talk about the Cardinals. And before we get into what they did last week, I'm gonna look at the Cardinals as kind of a whole step back. And last year you guys finished 8-8. You got a nice young quarterback, Kyler Murray, an up-and-coming young head coach. You have an impressive win against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, is this championship window, where do you feel you're in that? Is it just starting to open? Or are you guys going to be here for quite a while?
Well, obviously the safe answer is we hope so. If we're on a championship track, I mean, if you look at the narrative of a championship window, this is the beginning of where it should be, right? So if that's what we're heading towards, it looks right. We've got a really good young quarterback in his 3rd year, got a coach who's had, in his 3rd year, had time to implement the system. You've got a nice mix of veterans like J.J. Watt, and players like that, but you've also got players who are in their prime, DeAndre Hopkins, Budda Baker, and then a nice combinations of some younger players, obviously the quarterback, but also players like Rondale Moore. So, the ingredients are all there. The soup's been stirred. Let's just see, if it cooks up the way we hope. But that's what it looks like, and we're really hoping so.
Yeah, and the bad thing, you guys got one hell of a tough division right now. The NFC West is brutal.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's funny because going into this first week, I think it was pretty universal. People thought the NFC West was the best division of football. And that was when people thought the Cardinals were going to be like an 8-win team, right? And it's still only week 1, but with that performance, the Cardinals are looking more like a team that might be 10, 11, 12 wins, hopefully, right? If they can keep it up. So just think about how much tougher that division is based on the idea that the Cardinals are better than expected, hopefully. Yeah,
it's gonna be tough. I come from the NFC North, where we didn't have a single win in the division last week, so we're actually on top of the division. So I don't know if you guys are, but we are number 1.
Nice. I haven't checked with the tiebreakers, but yeah, nice.
All right, well, let's go back to that week 1 game for you guys against the Titans. How did Chandler Jones get 5 sacks? I mean, was it the Titans O-line just a mess? Was it something schematically? Was it having J.J. Watt there? What made Chandler Jones have 5 sacks? Because if he had 5 sacks against the Titans, he might have 15 against the Vikings next week.
Right. I mean, obviously the most accurate answer is a combination of things. So I think the things that went into that, one is he's Chandler, M&F, and Jones, right? That guy is good. Mm-hmm. He's playing for a contract. If I don't know if you followed what went on during this offseason, he wanted a contract extension. Word is, he was told he wouldn't get it, at least not yet. The Cardinals, I think, wanted to see him recovered from the injury. Rumor is he asked for a trade. They said no. So he's got something to prove, right? So there's a little extra spice in that sauce going on right now. But I think another part of it is you add J.J. Watt to the equation. And Chandler Jones has never had a player like him, to kind of help complement him and help prevent double teams. And even if Jones isn't necessarily preventing the double teams, he's helping to wreck things up in that middle of the the defensive line, offensive line, the trenches, and that helps disrupt things and give Jones an extra kind of path through. And sometimes, players just have a really great game, and Jones had just a really solid game. So it's all those things. Motivation to prove the Cardinals wrong for, not extending him early. J.J. Watt in the mix. And then, the Titans have a pretty good offensive line, but Taylor Lewan seemed to be a little bit injured. Word is he wasn't up to, 100%. So that's probably part of it. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of all those things.
Well, I hope his performance week 1 opened the eyes to the Cardinals front office, and they get that deal done tomorrow. So he's nothing left for him to prove against the Vikings coming up because
right. So he's happy and content. Yeah.
Yeah, because if he has to face Rashod Hill, it's not going to be good for the Vikings. All right, so we got to talk about the big one. Patrick Peterson leaves Arizona, comes to Minnesota, puts on the purple colors that he looks so good in. What kind of reception is he going to get when he comes back home? And how did you feel as a fan seeing him go?
So I don't think he's going to get a good reception. Obviously you have a channel where you interact with your fan community, Vikings fans, and you kind of have a finger on the pulse of how Vikings fans feel. And, doing the channel I'm doing, I also have that opportunity to kind of hear from fans. And I'll tell you, the thing I'm hearing from fans, besides a win, the thing that they want most out of this game is to see DeAndre Hopkins torch Patrick Peterson. It's personal and it's salty. But this isn't just like regular saltiness about someone leaving. I mean, our fans, I think, are no more or less salty than any other fans. There's something about that Patrick Peterson situation that gives it a little something extra. As Cardinals fans, we've been spoiled. We've had Larry Fitzgerald, who's like the consummate professional. We've had the ideal face of the franchise. And when Patrick Peterson was drafted, I know the way I felt, and I think a lot of other Cardinals fans felt, is he seemed like a guy who could kind of carry that torch after Fitzgerald. He's a smart guy, he's talented, but he also seems like a guy, who does a good job in terms of how he presents himself in terms of public image. He just seemed like that guy who might be that next great ambassador for the team. And then there was a PED suspension. And then there was the rumor that he had, word that he had asked for a trade. And then he walked that back. And then his performance declined. And then he left, and the Cardinals didn't re-sign him. And I actually, personally, I think just from a roster perspective, it was the right move for the Cardinals. His performance had trailed off last couple of years. His PFF grades were down quite a bit. The amount he was going to command in a salary to come back was a lot more than I think we should have been paying for someone at his point in his career. And I think our three starting cornerbacks are all making less combined, a couple of them on rookie contracts, but than he's making. So I think it was the right move, but Cardinals fans look at that and he just kind of was a disappointment in terms of the way things went compared to how they could have been. And then you add to that, on his podcast, he's kind of been chirping a little bit, and Cardinals fans don't love the GM, Steve Keim, so I don't think they totally fault him for having some issues with Steve Keim, but he's taken a few shots like DeAndre Hopkins. And then with the whole thing when Malcolm Butler retired, Malcolm Butler, we signed him, he was wearing number 21. And then he had some personal issue, right, that's going on, and it's still not really certain what it is. He left. And, the only word we've had is it was a personal matter. So you don't know what the guy's going through. Maybe it's family stuff. These are humans playing football. And then you may have seen the Patrick Peterson tweet, like, I guess it should have been Ward. And I get, whatever Ward is supposed to be, like, basically saying, well, I guess Malcolm Butler didn't work out because he shouldn't have been wearing number 21. And that just felt a little petty when a guy's going through whatever personal stuff Malcolm Butler's going through for Patrick Peterson to kind of send that tweet out. So all that added up leads to Cardinals fans not being particularly happy with one Mr. Peterson. So I think it's going to be a mix. There'll be some people cheering him, but I think you'll see more boos from Cardinals fans.
All right. Well, he was one of the lone bright spots on our defense last week against the Bengals. He played pretty well. Didn't see a sniff in preseason, but he came on and he looked okay. So the old man still got a little bit left in the tank. But I don't like hearing that there's potential extra motivation from the Cardinals side when it comes to Patrick Peterson.
Right.
Not great. So again,
especially when it's DeAndre Hopkins who might be motivated. So
for sure. All right, I'm here with Joe again from the Cardinal Rule. We'll drop a link to his show in the comments below. Be sure to follow him, check him out, harass him, whatever you got to do. He don't care. He can take it. He's a grown man.
That's
all right.
right.
Let's talk about another former Cardinal who is now a Minnesota Viking, and a guy the Vikings and their fans may be clamoring for sooner than later. Our first round pick from a couple years ago, Garrett Bradbury, not looking great at center. Dude just can't anchor. He's a major liability in pass protection. So Mason Cole, I wouldn't be shocked a couple weeks down the road, he may be given a shot as a starter, whether it is at center or guard. Tell me a little bit about Mason Cole and what we got with this, what we gave up to gave up a 6th round pick for is what I should be saying.
Yeah, and the guy who's always the most popular guy on the team is the backup for the guy who's struggling, right? So people are always going to kind of pull for him. So the Cardinals drafted him out of the third round. I think it was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a guy who in college, he played some left tackle, played some interior, he played around. So he's a versatile guy, right? So I think he's an ideal person to have as like a swing tackle / kind of depth person. But from our experience as Cardinals fans, he's not the guy you want starting. Now, I'll throw into this the caveat that there are always players who start out on this trajectory of not being particularly good, and something happens. They get the right coaching, the right switch flips, and they become, much better than what they had shown thus far. But based on what we've seen from him, we had him for 3 years. He never graded over 60 in PFF, always in the 50s. Wasn't particularly good, and he started a lot for us at center. But when we had the opportunity to go trade for Rodney Hudson, we did so quickly, and and we shipped him off, for a 6th rounder. So for Vikings fans that might hope that he's a better option than what you have, if I'm a betting man, I'm not betting he's a better option than Bradbury. But I could be wrong, right? People, like I said, sometimes players develop late. Get with the right coach. So if you're looking at him as a potential upgrade at center, I know he's got the 3rd round pedigree, but I wouldn't bank on it if it were me from what we've seen as Cardinals fans.
Oh, that was a very nice way of telling us that he sucks. I don't know if you saw Garrett Bradbury's PFF grade pass protection last week, but it was like a 26. So at this point,
okay, well,
50
listen,
would be an upgrade.
Well, then, yeah, there you go, right?
All right, so Vikings come to town. What is one matchup, the Vikings against the Cardinals, that kind of has you a little bit worried, keeps you up a little bit at night, but you're probably still awake anyway in the basking in the glow of your victory, right. So maybe you haven't got much sleep.
So I'm going to give you 2. The one that I think is what you're really looking for, and the one that I really am worrying about. The one I think you're looking for is obviously a player matchup with the Vikings. And the player matchup I worry about, is Thielen and Jefferson against our cornerbacks. Our cornerbacks held up really well against the Titans, against a really good pair of wide receivers in Tennessee. But the cornerback room is probably our biggest question mark right now. Obviously with Patrick Peterson moving on, Malcolm Butler, we signed him to be the replacement. He retired. So, we have Byron Murphy Jr., Robert Alford, who hadn't played in 2 seasons because of injuries, and rookie Marco Wilson as our top 3 corners. But they've played really well. They all graded reasonably well, held, again, the Tennessee receivers in check. So they looked really good in that first week test, but that's just 1 week. And this is another test coming up. So that's the one where, that matchup, I worry about it, but I'm also interested to see, are our cornerbacks really as good as they look, or was the pass rush just helping them that much? Now, the matchup I'm most worried about is the Cardinals versus their own press clippings, right? After that win, believing that they're, a contender, which I hope they are, and I do think they are. But do they get a little too high on themselves, right? And come in complacent and lose in a game where they're probably going to be favored, going into the game based on their performance. So if they believe their own clippings too much, that to me is the biggest threat going into this game.
Yeah, one thing that might make you feel a little better. I mean, Jefferson didn't play much in the preseason. I didn't play at all, actually. He had a shoulder injury, missed a lot of practice in camp. He did look a little rusty against the Bengals. Dropped a couple passes he should have had. He should have had a touchdown. I don't know how that one was not overturned, and the spot after was unbelievable, but didn't really quite have the swagger. I don't know. He seemed a little bit off last week. So hopefully that's out of his system and he can come and make your corners look silly next week. We'll see what happens there. Let's see here. What else we got? All right. So the Vikings, every team's got that one player when he's out there playing, you just kind of cringe. You hope for the best. You have no expectations. Ours right now is Rashod Hill. The guy was horrible last week. I think he had about 15 penalties. Every time there was a flag, it was usually number 69 getting called for something. So who is that guy right now for you? When he's out there, you kind of just dread and you hold your breath and you hope for the best.
So I got to really think about that one, because I'll be honest, we've gotten rid of a lot of the players that were that guy for us.
Mason Cole was one of them.
Mason Cole was one of them. 2 of them are on your team. Patrick Peterson, because he led the NFL amongst cornerbacks in penalties drawn last year. He had like 12. And and then our other starting quarterback, Drake Kirkpatrick, had 9. Those guys are all gone. But I did come up with a name who's on our practice squad. Okay. And that was the best I could do. And that's Chris Streveler, quarterback. If you don't know Chris Streveler, he played in the CFL. He is our attempt to emulate what New Orleans has done with what's his name, and now it's skipping the quarterback, Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, right? The guy who's kind of that's fast, kind of H-back / quarterback / whatever, Swiss Army knife. So, the Cardinals brought in Chris Streveler to be our backup quarterback last year, and they seem to be trying to do the Taysom Hill thing, and it just never quite worked. They tried using him a few times on gadget plays, and it just didn't work. He started a game for us or played significant snaps when Murray was beat up last year. Didn't look good. Now, he did look good in the preseason, but that's the one guy, who's still kind of part of our roster, the practice squad, that when he's out there, just this is going to be a trick play that isn't going to work.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're so stacked. You got to go to the practice squad for that question. Much appreciated. All right. Again, I'm here with Joe from the Cardinal Rule. Again, be sure to check out his channel. Awesome stuff. All right. So let's say there's an expansion draft. Cardinals can pick anybody they want from the Vikings. Who are you taking? Who are you plucking from the purple and putting in that crimson red?
So the answer, there were 2 guys that were there were 3 I consider, but 2, there's one who's like, if I'm going for just trying to win this year, it's Harrison Smith, because I just think about how awesome would it be to have him and Budda Baker paired in that secondary. By far, it would be the best safety tandem in the NFL. Yep. But going in general, I'm going with Justin Jefferson because he's a young receiver, really looked good last year, and you get him for the next 10 to 12 years. So to me, that's the smartest pick. A guy who's going to be likely an all-pro wide receiver for years to come. Awesome.
Did you say there was a third?
Dalvin Cook, right? That seems like an obvious name. Upgrade our running back game. My own philosophy on roster building is don't invest heavy on running backs. Invest in that offensive line. The San Francisco, you look at them, they pluck whatever undrafted free agent they can in Kyle Shanahan's system, and he runs effectively. So, but obviously Dalvin Cook is an absolute stud. So he'd probably be another one I'd consider if in that hypothetical scenario.
Well, and that being said, you look at the Cardinals roster, and anybody looking outside in may think running back is a position they could upgrade. Did you think they maybe would go Najee Harris in the draft last year?
I didn't think they would, and I didn't want them to. I know there were a lot of people who thought they would. Again, I'm a big believer in get that offensive line right, and then draft guys in day 2 and 3. And you look at it, and Dalvin Cook's a 2nd-round pick, right? You look at a lot of the best running backs in the league, a lot of them are 2nd-round picks. There's a few 1st-rounders, but you can find really good players in rounds 2, 3, 4, and even 5. So, I didn't want them to. I didn't think they would either, and obviously they didn't. So,
all right, yeah, all right. Just curious. I was just curious about that. All right. So, last question. All right, how do you see this thing going down Sunday? Who wins? By how much? And would your practice squad beat our starters? No, I'm just who wins the game?
So Cardinals fans are a little bit like Vikings fans in that we know what it means to kind of be disappointed. So I never try to be that really I never try to be an overly confident fan of my team. Obviously after that win, it's hard not to be a little bit confident. I think we have a good roster, but I'm gonna say that I do think the Cardinals will win. I'm going to say that it's going to be closer than the Tennessee game because, Tennessee, I think a lot of that had to do with Tennessee shooting themselves in the foot with some penalties too. I think their offensive line struggled. I think some of our players like Chandler Jones, that's probably going to be his best game of the season. I'm sure he'll still be good, but, I think it will be closer. I think we're going to come down to earth a little bit, but I'm hopeful that, what we saw is, as far as the Cardinals being a legitimate contending team in terms of how they play, that we'll continue to see that, and that we'll manage to win something like 28-17 or something like that. Not a complete blowout, but that's what I'm hoping for, and that's what, if I had to bet, that's what I'm betting on. But man, just when you get too confident, that's when you have that trap game. So
you know, you hide these jabs real nicely. I tell you, man, you come across as this nice guy, and you just kind of slowly, subtly stick me in the gut here every now and then.
Catch you off guard, right?
You do, you do. Actually, the Vikings are gonna rise up and play much better than they did against the Bengals. The O-line does terrify me. Chandler Jones, Rashod Hill, any of your D tackles against the O-line was garbage. I do think you'll win, but I think the Vikings are gonna make this a lot closer than many people think. So it's what they do. They, you know, the fans are gonna count them out after last week, and they'll come back and make it close, give them a little bit of hope, and then crush their souls like we tend to do. So, all right. Well, Joe, thanks for coming on. Thanks for SKOL'ing. Good luck every week, but this week. Great talking to you, man. And yeah, maybe we'll touch base again in the future.
Would love to, man. It was a good time, man.
All right, that has been SKOL'ing with the Enemy. Be sure to check out Joe's channel, The Cardinal Rule on YouTube. Heck, give him a follow. Why not? And remember to keep your skull in your hole.